Welcome. I've created a series of open channel flow animations that I'd like to share with you. If you've watched my other videos, you know that most show static solutions to problems where the varying quantity, for example width or slope or roughness, doesn't realistically vary in time. This animation is different. This animation shows how a feature, in this case a step, sets up different conditions in the channel depending upon the discharge rate. In layman's terms, the channel at lower flow conditions will have features that will be drowned at higher flows. Before we start the animation, let's first go over the different subfigures that you see on the screen. So in the upper graph, you're looking at the channel itself. The black line traces the channel bottom. The red dashed line shows critical depth, and the blue line shows the actual depth. You can see that upstream of the step, there's actually a bunching up of depth in advance of the step. Basically, the flow is gathering energy upstream of the step because the step itself represents a choke. The step requires more energy than the flow has way back up here upstream, so it gathers that energy in advance of the step so that continuity can be maintained. And then downstream of the step, we see a hydraulic jump, and that's because the energy that's been gathered here needs to be dissipated, and we need to return to normal depth, subcritical flow downstream. The lower three graphs all have on the horizontal axis what I have time in quotes. They're not really time so much as you can imagine that different discharges are moving through the channel. If you like, you could imagine that the channel is moving from basically low flow conditions to flood flow conditions. And so the leftmost of these three graphs just shows the prescribed discharge versus some sort of fictitious time. The middle graph shows the excess energy. So if the excess energy is less than zero, then there's actually a dearth of energy, and therefore a choke exists. You'll see that this curve will trace upwards, and that with time, as the discharge increases, the choke will disappear. And then finally, this last graph will show the actual depth and critical depth at the midpoint of the step over the range of discharges considered. All right, with that, let's set this animation in motion, and I will stop it at several critical moments. So you can see discharge is increasing. You should be able to see that the hydraulic jump is actually migrating upstream. We are still in choke conditions, and therefore these two graphs are not yet that interesting. The main thing that's happening is depth is increasing with the larger discharge, and as a result, the hydraulic jump is migrating upstream and is now starting to migrate up the downstream face of this step. Let's let it evolve a little bit further. You can see the jump continuing to move upstream. We'll pause it. Notice that a choke still exists, but we're right at the edge of zero excess energy, so that choke condition is about to be lifted, and we'll see that the features on top of the step are going to change dramatically when that happens. So we continue. The choke has just disappeared. I've drawn a vertical line where the choke has disappeared, and you can see that now the conditions over the step look very similar to my other animation of flow over a step, and you can see that the hydraulic jump has disappeared. We no longer have a choke. The actual flow depth is greater than critical depth over the step, and therefore the choke no longer exists. we have an excess of energy. It's barely visible yet. And we're about to start seeing a bifurcation between the actual depth and critical depth at the midpoint of the step. It's actually there already, but it's hard to see because the animation was stopped so close to choke conditions. Let's let this play out a little bit further, and you can see that the presence of the step is still visible in the water surface, but not nearly so dramatically. You can see that there's an energy surplus or excess, and you can see now that the actual depth mid-step is greater than the depth, the critical depth mid-step. And so again, the choke conditions have disappeared. Let's let this animation play through to the end, and you should be able to see that the presence of the step is all but invisible now. And by the end of the animation, it truly has reached a point where it's probably measurable, but would be difficult to observe in the real world. So with that, I will say thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a fun one to create, and I invite you to leave your comments and questions in the comment area below. Also, please click in the description area of my video to learn more details about this animation, and about my book, and about links to other concepts from my book.